Here is a country of great contrast.
Great civilization of antiquity.
A foreign country a step away.
All right, we're back on the Casa de Cavazos pod. Justin is again busy, so it's me, Ada Cavazos Squad in Harlingen, Texas, and Nathan Cavazos in Weslaco, Texas, coming back with your Tejano connection to reality. So what's going on with you in Weslaco right now? There's a storm going on.
Yep, there's a storm going on. There was accidents this morning. There's more accidents. I have a couple of friends that are still stuck.
What?
One of my friends asked if I knew anybody with a large truck, and I was like a lift? He's like, yeah, because my mom's stuck in San Juan. They had another friend that's been stuck since like 4:30 in McAllen. I was doing a job yesterday, and one of the other tradesmen there said he found one of my drills, and he's like, do you want me to bring it back? And I was like, well, yeah, if you could. But I assumed like he was still at the job site, and he texted me later like, you really owe me. Going back cost me 3 hours.
What the heck? But he didn't get stuck. It just was horrible.
No, it was just really slow. But like I said, I wouldn't have asked him to get it for me if I knew he had left. I was assuming he was still there if he was asking me about it.
So basically it's been raining all day, and it's been raining pretty hard most of the time?
Well, I mean, it was raining a little bit in the morning, and then it let up, and then around 4 o'clock it got really heavy again. Well, at least where I was at, but it must have been raining all day throughout the rest of the valley for it to get the way it did.
Okay, because in Harlingen, I don't think we got a lot of rain earlier. It only started getting hard in the afternoon. So I don't know what's going on the roads because I haven't been on the roads. But here at the house, definitely some water building up around the back door. And I think the street also was pretty flooded in front of us.
Yeah, when I got home, I had to drive around 30 miles an hour coming from Mercedes. I mean, the street where we live doesn't really get too flooded as far as like we can't get into the neighborhood. But my wife is still at work right now because she did not listen to me.
What?
I told her to come home at 5 and she said she's going to work late. I told her I don't think that's a good idea. And now she can't even make it home.
So what is she going to do? Is she going to sleep there? Because the rain's not letting up where I'm at. Is it still raining where you're at?
It's raining, but it's like coming and going now. But I don't know when she's going to get out here. I think they might even have to bring her home.
What does that entail when the city brings her home? Do they bring her like in a fire truck or something?
I mean, I think they do have like one big truck the city bought that can get through this kind of stuff. I don't know if they would actually go out of their way and take a fire truck, but yeah, I don't know why she did that.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people made that decision wrongly. Maybe they thought, it won't be that bad. I have a truck or I have a certain route that I can do, but it ended up being really bad. We get a lot of rain sometimes and we can't deal with it.
Well, also sounds like the city kind of dropped the ball because I was in Mercedes and I was trying to do a job around 4 o'clock and they were like, no, you can't come in. Like, we sent everybody home. They were kind of ahead of the curve there. They're like, well, we'd rather you guys make it home safely than sticking around till 5 when it's getting worse.
So you're saying the city should have told everyone to go home?
Yes, I think that would have been the right decision.
Well, as long as people are safe, I mean, it is very annoying when you can't get places and also when your car gets stuck and there's probably some damage that happens when people's cars get stuck in the water. As long as people don't die, that's my concern.
Well, I did share that video on our family chat. I didn't know that it was true till I saw it where that hospital in McAllen literally has water inside the building.
But it looked like it was more of a pipe. The way the water was like literally shooting out.
Oh, I mean, I guess I didn't look that closely, but I did see water like all through that hallway.
Yeah, we'll have to learn more about it. But it was like streaming in like a fire hydrant. So then they like opened a door, like a wall opened up or something. And then it really started like shooting out. So it kind of seemed like it was more of a pipe issue rather than a flooding issue. So I don't know.
It's very possible.
So what do you think about that Signalgate story that was broken by the Atlantic? That story's crazy.
Yeah, everybody's roasting them already.
I mean, there's so many different layers to it. So the person who broke the story was Jeffrey Goldberg, who's, I believe, the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic. And he has broken other stories that have been questioned, well, at least questioned by the right. So he broke the story about suckers and losers, about Trump saying that veterans who had died were suckers and losers, or I guess veterans in general. And then he also had broken the Vanessa Guillen story when allegedly Trump said he wasn't going to pay for a $60K funeral for a effing Mexican. So that's the same guy that then got on this Signal chat somehow. And then he ended up publishing what happened.
What do you mean somehow? Isn't the story that he was accidentally added by somebody?
Yeah. So the story is, the article goes into depth. The article that Jeffrey Goldberg wrote. He got a request from Michael Waltz to connect on Signal. And he accepted it thinking, well, maybe he's going to tell me something or want to talk about Ukraine or Iran or something. So let me accept this and see what happens. Nothing happened initially. And then like 2 days later, it said that he was added to the Houthi PC small group, I think. And then he started getting messages related to that. And it took him a while because he said that there's a lot of like kind of misinformation that goes on. And sometimes like journalists get like pulled into like fake things on purpose. And so he was trying to figure out if it was real. Like, okay, is this real? Like, I don't know if they're just trying to punk me or trying to like, you know, make me say the wrong thing or something. So he just continued to like see what was going on, trying to figure out, okay, what do I do here? Is this real? Until they actually started saying that they were going to attack the Houthis. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm still not sure if it's real. It said it's going to happen at a certain time. So let me see if it happens at a certain time, then it's real. And so then he started looking up on Twitter or other sources and it happened. And he's like, oh, okay, it's real. So at that point, that's when he realized he needed to leave the chat. So he like left the group. And after that, he posted the original article, which didn't have all the information because he said it looked like it was classified. Well, some of it was classified, so he didn't want to post everything. Apparently, there's a second article now, though, because after that happened, some people were like, okay, yeah, we messed up. Like, I don't know how that happened. We're going to investigate. And then some people started to say, well, he's a disgraced, terrible journalist. And maybe he hacked into the Signal chat or hacked into Mike Waltz's phone numbers somehow.
So throughout all of this, he never responded. He kind of just watched.
Right. Well, because he had nothing to say. I mean, this was apparently 19 people like J.D. Vance, Hegseth, that are doing like national security conversations and planning. But he wasn't sure like why he was in the chat and if it was real, because he wasn't sure if someone was just trying to misinform him.
So how did it get twisted to that it was possibly Russia interfering with Signal?
I think that's all the MAGA BS. Because at first they were like, oh, this is bad. And then they started to say things like, well, actually, something else might have happened. Like, they basically tried to cover their butts in a really stupid way. Like, Mike Waltz actually went on, I think, Fox, saying, well, this person's terrible, Jeffrey Goldberg. And he probably hacked into it somehow or hacked into, like, my phone number somehow. It was really bizarre. And then Trump didn't even understand what was going on. He's like, yeah, something about a bad signal. There was a bad signal. It's like, what? No, that's the name of the app, dude.
Yeah, I was reading his comments today and like it was hurting my head just reading it. I was like, man, this sounds so incoherent. I was like, this is the president of the United States. This is his response to this scandal.
Yeah. So Hegseth, Trump, and Waltz, and I'm not sure who else, started to take this tactic of let's just discredit Jeffrey Goldberg because he's horrible.
But that's always been their tactic, though.
Yeah.
He said it even in another interview. I don't remember who it was with, but he said that he did it because he needed to discredit people in case anything comes up. They won't believe him.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's pretty obvious that Michael Waltz screwed up in some way. I don't know what he did. He must have intended to select someone else and accidentally selected Goldberg. Something like that. I don't know. It was very weird. So apparently in the national security community, they're pretty upset about this. They do feel like it was really bad. They're not supposed to be using this app for these types of communications. It's not secure enough. And there's like certain processes they have to follow when they have these types of conversations. I believe one of the people in the chat was even in Russia when this was happening.
That kind of makes sense why they would try to say that it was some Russian interference.
Okay. Well, someone was saying that the fact that someone was just on their cell on the Signal app in Russia while they were in the chat means that there's a good chance that someone in Russia was like looking at that chat somehow, like they hacked it or something, because it wouldn't be that hard to hack it. And then also the chat was set to disappearing messages, which is also not cool when you're having that kind of conversation, which has to be recorded. You're not supposed to just throw away national security conversations in 1 week.
This is par for the course for Donald Trump. I think I remember in his first 4 years, like they were talking about how the presidents don't really get to just have like normal devices. And of course, no, he used his regular phone like always, like stuff that none of the other presidents would do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not surprising whatsoever. I mean, instead of using the technology that's given to them that's secure, like, no, we'll just use an app that everybody can access.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big takeaways for me are that these are amateurs like we said they were. You know, Hegseth and all these people were not qualified. And also, like, how much is Trump even deciding? Because he wasn't even in the chat. JD Vance and 18 other people were in the chat. And they said that's actually, like, really big for that type of chat. So are they basically, like, making the decisions for Trump and doing all the thinking for Trump? And he's not really doing shit?
I don't think he cares in this current administration. I think he just wanted to get elected so he wouldn't go to jail, and now whatever happens doesn't matter. I mean, he's not going to jail. He's making money. Do whatever y'all need to do, and I'll take credit for it. And if it goes wrong, I'll just be like, "What? Like,
I don't know about the signal. That was a bad signal. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it was a hack by Jeffrey Goldberg." I think it's funny because I think Trump's a puppet to some extent. After all the like stories about Biden being the puppet, I'm not sure that Biden was as much of a puppet as Trump is.
You mean Hillary when he was like, "You're the puppet"?
Yeah. Yeah, that was weird. And what's going on now with them having this conversation with JD Vance and Trump's not involved in the signal chat.
There's no way that they would have ever let Hillary get away with this.
Of course not. I mean, but that's a double standard, right? Like that's why our politics are way too divisive. It needs to be back to a more civil discourse where it's not just all politicized and you can basically say, hey, my side screwed up. And there are some Republicans that are speaking out. And so they're going to investigate it further.
Yeah, but the reporting's been so skewed. Like CNN, of course, anything that anyone considers left is saying, hey, this is a really big screw up. And the right is either ignoring it or saying like, it's no big deal. So,
but they've also been really inconsistent.
As far as what?
Well, just the things they were saying, like the spokesperson Levitt was acting like it wasn't a big deal. And then, I don't know if it was today, but some point recently, she's like, oh yeah, it was a mistake. It's like, okay, so what is it? Is it a mistake or not? Like you guys basically downplay it and then now you're like, oh, it's a mistake. Like, okay, be consistent.
In the beginning, I definitely heard that it was a screw up. And then I guess once they told Donald Trump what happened, he told him, hey, you guys just need to go by the playbook. Discredit them.
The playbook.
Say it doesn't matter. Well, that's what it's always been. Like anything that's against them is, hey, go after them. Attack them.
Yeah.
So I think that's really what happened is like they knew they screwed up, so they admitted to it. And then, of course, the president told them, no, this is what you need to do. Just discredit them and it'll go away.
That's a stupid strategy, though. I mean, it works for some people, but I don't think it works for everyone.
It works for his base, and that's all they care about.
I mean, how well is this all working for his base, though? Because now there have been multiple special elections, and there's going to be some other special elections, I believe, on April 1st.
Do we have any results on these yet?
So we have some results, and Democrats are overperforming. So there was a Pennsylvania state Senate seat that flipped. So we'll see what happens on April 1st because there are two people, I think I mentioned it last time, Gabe Alamont and Josh Wheel. We really have to watch to see what happens, to see if there is some movement for the Democrats. Like, even if they lose, like, if you see, like, a huge difference in terms of the amount they lost by, like maybe they lost by 15 points last time, and then now they lose by 2 points. That's still very positive.
Yeah, what's this about Elon Musk and Wisconsin
Oh, how he's
offering $1 million?
how he's trying to affect that election because he's all about the judges now.
Yes.
I mean, he's basically just trying to do the same thing as before, same playbook, basically throw a lot of money there and see if all the money will help them win that election. I don't know. What's going on with the courts is pretty scary because there's that, trying to influence elections with money. Then there's the whole thing where they're trying to say they want to impeach judges. And then Mike Johnson said recently they should get rid of some of the judges as well because one of the congressional powers is to decide what to do about the lower courts. So maybe get rid of some of the lower courts.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the birthright citizenship case to get heard.
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to tell us all we need to know about what's going to happen with the Supreme Court.
I mean, I think that already we're seeing the Supreme Court push back. There have been some more recent decisions where the Supreme Court actually didn't do what you thought they would do. And Kavanaugh actually didn't just sign on to something that was a Republican priority. So I think the justices are starting to, at least some of them. I mean, you're not going to get that from Alito and Thomas and maybe even Gorsuch, but you're going to get from Barrett and from Roberts some principles. And hey, if Kavanaugh is also going to join in, that's very helpful in terms of pushing back on this administration.
Yeah. What did you think about Trump also claiming that he didn't sign the proclamation for the Alien Enemies Act?
Why was he even saying that?
I'm not sure, but there were some articles saying like, well, if he didn't sign it, who did? I mean, that's telling you something. I mean, is he how you were talking about right now? How much of this administration is he actually running?
Yeah. So why did he even want to publicize that he didn't sign it?
I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking. Like, what do you make of it?
I mean, it's weird to admit that because he doesn't want to take credit for things that are bad. I mean, he loves taking credit for things in general. But why would you say that when you were complaining that Biden was auto-penning things and those things were no longer valid? It doesn't make sense. He doesn't make sense.
Some people think he was trying to shift the blame to Rubio for this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's what he does, right? He likes to take credit for things, shift blame, and then it ends up not making sense because, like I said, he's saying that Biden was not signing things, and then he's like, well, I didn't sign that. Like, wait, what? Why are you complaining about Biden then?
Yeah, I mean, he just likes to make a big show because he likes to be on TV and he'll sign executive orders and hold them up.
Oh, yeah, he always does that. He wants to hold it up in the little binder.
Yeah, every time.
I'm like, okay, why do we care? That's bizarre. We should do that in our own jobs. I should write a prescription and I should hold it up. Be like, look at this. Look at this. And just be super proud of myself.
I'm also not going to accept any more payments unless they give me a giant check.
And then you're going to show it like this.
With all their account information.
Also, every permit that you get for a job, also do that. As soon as they give you the permit. Do you always get physical permits or are they electronic now?
There's a lot of electronic, but
Print it out.
there's a few cities where I got to sign. So as soon as I sign it, I'll take a picture.
and then in order to be like Donald Trump, then you'd have to, on your page, take a picture every time and post it. So you'd be like, look at these permits that I got, guys. Look at this. Look at this check that I got. It's bizarre. If you think about it in terms of normal people, you're like, yeah, it's bizarre. Did you hear about the medical school case involving Texas Tech?
Yes, I did. You told me about it, and I'm looking at it right now.
So remember how I've been saying multiple times that now minorities and women are basically going to get screwed in terms of schools having a chilling effect. They're not going to want to be at risk of being sued, being prosecuted because they let in a woman or a minority with a lower score than a white guy. So this is exactly what happened in this case. So George Stewart applied to Texas medical schools. He had a 3.96 GPA from UT Austin, really good. And he had a 511 MCAT, which apparently is about average, maybe actually a little bit below average for admitted students to some of these schools. And
It actually says it's good.
yeah, so it's like decent, but it's not like, oh my God, he got like the top score and didn't get in. It was average.
As per Reddit, anything between 510 and 514 is good. So he had a good score.
Yeah, it was
Had a good
solid. Right.
And a good GPA.
But the thing is, we also don't know, and I'm not sure that it's available in the cases. We don't know what his extracurriculars were, whether or not he was a good interviewee. Like maybe he came across as like an asshole or a narcissist or something, like someone you just don't want to work with. Who knows? But basically what happened is he then requested the records for admitted applicants. And then he found that minorities and women had received lower scores than him in some instances. So as a result of that, he was suing that he was discriminated against because he didn't get in with his score and other people got in with a lower score. So he was charging both racial discrimination and sex discrimination. And the sex discrimination part of the case didn't go forward, but the racial discrimination case did go forward. And ultimately it was settled. And as part of the settlement, Texas Tech promised not to consider race in admissions.
Okay. Did you see that initially it was against more than just Texas Tech, but for whatever reason, the schools from the UT system, he withdrew the case and only went after Texas Tech?
I did see that, but I didn't really see the details on why he did that.
Okay. And so you got into medical school, and the process is obviously doing the MCAT. Is there an interview involved in getting into the schools?
Yes. Interviews are a part of the process.
So is there a possibility that he just interviewed really poorly?
Yeah, he could have interviewed really poorly and people were like, yeah, I don't want this guy because he seems really odd, really narcissistic or something off. And you don't know anything else. Like, I may have to look at the case more just to see if there's more detail, but you don't know whether or not he had like amazing extracurriculars either. You also don't know his letters of recommendation. I mean, he basically made this whole case about the score, about the MCAT score.
Which is what the current administration is trying to do.
Exactly. And it all comes back to Tucker Carlson. And then it goes to Elon Musk. And it goes to these other people. Apparently, Stephen Miller, he was involved in the litigation. I'm not sure how he's involved, but the group that helped with the litigation of this case, it involves Stephen Miller in some way.
So did this guy get into medical school somewhere else? Because I'm just reading that in the settlement he reached, he also agreed to not reapply or seek employment at Texas Tech.
I don't know. I was trying to look it up, but his name is so like generic. I couldn't really find anything on Google regarding whether or not he got into a med school somewhere in the United States.
Which I'm sure he would. He's coming out of UT Austin with that GPA and a decent MCAT score.
I mean,
I'm sure he could get in somewhere else.
You would think that if he had a really wide net, he could get into either an MD or a DO school somewhere.
Okay. So maybe he just really wanted to get into these schools only, and the fact that he didn't get in.
I mean, people do want to get into the UT med schools if they're Texas residents because they are a lot cheaper than a lot of schools. So that tends to be the reason that people want to get into one of the Texas schools when they're a Texas resident. I don't know what the tuitions are right now, but when I was in med school at UT Medical Branch in Galveston, I think the tuition was only like $8,000 or $10,000 a year, which is like ridiculous. I mean, obviously that was a long time ago, 2002 to 2006, but still ridiculously low even for that time period.
Yeah. I also find it interesting that Texas Tech has continued to say that they didn't do anything wrong. They've denied all wrongdoing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that if you look at an application holistically, it may appear that you're involving race, but maybe you're not involving race, actually. Maybe you're involving the fact that the person came from a disadvantaged background, and people that are minorities just tend to have that disadvantaged background more often. So maybe those people that had lower scores were minorities, but at the same time, maybe they were first-generation college students. Maybe they came from a household that was low income. Maybe they came from a household where they didn't get the help that they needed. They couldn't afford MCAT prep, stuff like that. And so these factors are not considered, and they're wanting schools to just consider scores.
I kind of didn't connect the two things till now, how they're trying to get businesses to also remove their DEI policies. Because I was about to say, like, well, how does that work? Like once you get out of the school, because like when you go apply for a job, like it's still the same thing. You have to interview well.
Yeah.
But if you're saying that the only thing that matters is like the scores on paper, then what happens to the interview process even at jobs or even for med school? Why would you even have interviews anymore?
Yeah.
Like you're just going to pick the best scores. The interview is irrelevant. And then moving on to those jobs that are no longer no longer following DEI practices for their hiring. They're just going to look at this guy came from so-and-so school, has a higher score, hiring this person. Even though this person might be a horrible fit for the job,
Yeah.
but I got to pick them because I can't choose anything doing with diversity.
Well, they probably could, but then they're at risk of a lawsuit or some sort of DOJ action.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying though, like the application process becomes worthless. Like your score should pretty much just tell you you're in. Like you should already know, like, oh, if I get this score, I'm in. It doesn't matter about interview anymore.
I wonder if they would get rid of the interviews, because that is a good point. Like if you know that you're just going to get sued or something bad's going to happen to you as a school, maybe your funding is taken away by the Trump administration. Maybe you're like, why even waste my time with these interviews? Because I'm going to have to choose the people with the highest scores, or then I'm going to get interrogated, possibly sued, possibly lose funding. It's a pretty scary environment for a lot of the people involved. I guess if you're a white guy, you're like in the best position, which, I mean, so we're going back.
What they wanted.
We're going back. How many years?
I don't know. I don't understand how we got to this point.
I mean, we've talked about it so many times. We got to this point because Fox News was incredibly successful. The whole right-wing media has become incredibly successful at like getting Mexicans to be like, oh, DEI is bad. I'm like, dude, that's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt your kids.
Yeah, I still tell people at the end of the day, I'd rather be white because like you guys don't go anywhere in the country and people are not like, oh my God, look at that person or whatever, or look down on you.
Yeah.
But as Hispanic, I've experienced that. Black people have experienced it. Every other race has. So, I mean, why do you act like you're being discriminated against? Being white's still really good in the United States and everywhere else.
Well, because according to George Stewart, he got a higher score than other people, and so he deserved to get in.
I mean, it's just like applying for a job. I mean, there's going to be other applicants. You might have the same score. You might be within a few points. Do those few points on that one day make you a better candidate? I don't think so.
Well, we've also definitely seen people that got really good scores but were really terrible doctors. And that might have been picked up in the interview with George Stewart. Like, this guy, he may not actually translate to a good doctor even though the scores look good. We've seen it quite a bit. Like the scores don't necessarily mean a lot, especially in medicine. Like there are just a lot of factors involved. You actually, in medicine, want someone who's humble, someone who's constantly wanting to learn. You want intelligence, of course, but I don't feel like it takes that much intelligence to just be conscientious, do the right thing, care about the patients. I mean, listen to the nurses. You should listen to the nurses because sometimes, especially early in your career, they may help you out.
Yeah, I remember that, watching Scrubs. You said that was pretty accurate back then, and the nurses did end up helping a lot of them in the beginning.
Yeah.
While they're getting adjusted, learning.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think you should ever think like, oh, I've done 20 years now and have so much experience and so much knowledge. Like, I'm not going to listen to anybody. But I think at a certain point, you do get to the point where you don't really need that much. Like, I don't want to say it's nursing help. Like, you don't need that, like, hey, maybe you should have done this. Or like, oh, maybe that dose is wrong. And you're like, okay, well, let me double check. And then you're like, oh, shit, yeah. That I actually should have dosed it a little bit higher, a little bit lower, or whatever.
So do we have any of the actual scores that he's claiming were significantly lower?
I mean, I'm sure that there were scores that were lower.
It says significantly lower, though.
I'd have to look at the cases in more depth.
So what kind of score do you need to get into like Texas Tech and UT Med School?
I think the average was around 512.
So if he says significantly, do you think he saw somebody getting like a
Like a 500 or something?
Like a 500,
I think
something.
it's possible, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that person didn't deserve to be a doctor.
I think it just changes everything though, like for all schools.
Well, like I've been saying, like that's why our kids are going to have to get really high scores now.
I mean, assuming things stay like this for 10 years.
And things are probably not going to change significantly anytime soon. And what happens too sometimes is that if something becomes the standard, it becomes the law, like it takes a lot sometimes to roll it back.
I think I said this on the last pod when Justin was actually here. I think like, yeah, it might work right now, but then once their own children start to get affected by it, they'll realize it wasn't the right choice.
Still, I'm not sure that people will really realize that affected their kids. Like they're just like, oh, med school's hard to get into. That's why my kid didn't get in. They're not going to have like a comparison point. Like, oh, if my kid would have applied, 20 years ago.
I think they are. And I think that this case is an example. Like he already saw what they were doing and he's already like, hey, like you should take me. So they're going to be upset.
You're saying that they're going to see this case, parents of minorities and women now, and they're going to realize what's going to happen later on when their kid can't get in.
Yeah, of course. But even like the white people are going to see it too. And they're going to feel it.
Well, yeah, because even a white woman's going to be affected.
Yep. They're going to see it now. And then they're going to be like, oh, I shouldn't have voted for this. But at that point, we don't know what's going to happen. What if Trump does get another term and then they're still not going to get in?
Well, or if Trump doesn't get another term, if it continues with Donald Trump Jr. or J.D. Vance and they have the same thought process, then it's still going to be bad.
I just don't know if they'll lead the same way. Because at that point, if he can't run, like Trump can't do anything to you at that point. I mean, at that point, the only person that could actually try to threaten you is maybe Elon with money. He would be throwing his money behind somebody to get you out.
Yeah. I don't know what this George Stewart strategy was, but if you look at the average MCATs, he probably could have found a school because even within Texas, of course, the highest average MCAT is going to be at Baylor and UT Southwestern. So average MCAT at Baylor is 518 for people admitted. What was UT Southwestern? UT Southwestern is 516.
Yeah, I don't get the point of this lawsuit because he obviously would have got in somewhere.
Yeah, so you look at like other schools, like UT RGV School of Medicine has an average of 508 admitted. UTMB Galveston has a 511. And then you look at some other schools. I don't know what school this is. University of Houston Tillman J. Fertitta Family College of Medicine has an average of 506. University of Texas at Tyler is a 505. So you think he could get in somewhere unless there's like some red flag with his application or his interviewing.
It also shows that he has like little to no resiliency. Like, I have to get into these schools or if not, I'm suing. Like,
yeah, I don't know. The story is weird. But I did talk to some people recently that were telling me, oh, like my kid wants to go to med school and this is a white female. I'm like, she's going to be needing a very high score because anyone that's not a white man, they're going to be scrutinized. So you're going to have to pay for that test prep. She can do it. I mean, I absolutely believe a lot of people can do it, but they don't really know how to do it. So I'm trying to help people to say, hey, this is what you have to do. Have a strategy as far as getting a good GPA in college. And you're going to have to do that test prep to get that really good MCAT score.
yeah, it sounds like we're really going to have to try to push something down here, especially for people to really take these tests seriously. It doesn't seem like it's going to help anymore to be, I mean, it shouldn't have helped regardless to be like Hispanic or whatever, but if we're not pushing for these higher scores, I mean, what are we really doing anyway? We should be having programs down here where we lift these scores up. Like I was just talking to one of my friends the other day at my daughter's birthday party, and his daughter was about to take the ACT at where we went to, which was WHS, and the average score is still 18 there. So, I mean, we need to do something where that average goes up. Like, why is it still at 18?
Well, that's why I was saying that we're not going to be able to rely on getting help anymore. Like, even though there's no segregation of schools officially, we really are still segregated. Like, if you look at where people go to schools, like you do end up seeing a lot of Hispanics, Black people clustered together in bad schools, in bad areas. So that's a fact. And as a result, if you don't have the best education, it's going to be harder for you to get the scores and to get out. And then if you can't get out into like a MD degree or some other really good career, then you're not going to be able to then give those advantages to your kids. Like, you're not going to be able to help them elevate as well as you might have if you had gone to medical school and learned how to do things and learned how to study and learned how to be at the highest level of a certain field. So it's a rough situation. Like, it's not an intelligence issue. Like, it's absolutely not. Like, I've talked to people that have had a 600 some on the SAT, and I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense at all. Like, you're not a dumb guy. You just didn't have the right education and the right mentoring. And a lot of these people, when you talk to them, they didn't study at all for the SAT. They didn't know how or that they needed to.
Yeah, I mean, when I did the ACT, I barely even studied for it. I mean, I was able to at least get a guide to study, but I didn't take it very seriously. But even that little bit that I looked at was enough for me to go above average for where we were from.
Yeah. Well, we just got to help each other out and educate other people that don't know what to do.
Yeah, but it's going to be hard to facilitate this because now they're gutting the Department of Education. Probably going to have less funding for these schools. And what's going to happen if they start cutting pay? Some of these teachers are just going to leave as well. So what?
I think it has to be grassroots. I think it has to be just community members saying, hey, like, your kid needs to start studying for the SAT already. This is what they need to do. Because remember that there's also the PSAT. So you usually take that in 10th grade. And a lot of people down here don't know that you need to study for that too, because it's important in terms of getting like a potential national merit scholarship. But they just gave us a test. I remember I was just like, okay, take this test. I'm like, okay. You know, I didn't really know that you could get scholarships from it.
Did you get scholarships from the PSAT?
Yes. You didn't know that either.
No, I did not. This is news to me right now.
Yeah. So there's a whole national merit scholarship program. Without studying, I got a national merit commendation because I got a high enough score, but I didn't get high enough to get into the scholarship part. You can be a semifinalist and then you can advance to a finalist. And at some point you could actually get a scholarship. And then there are some other like corporate scholarships too that are potentially available if you do really well on that PSAT. So really your kid should be studying for the SAT already, like probably in 8th grade.
Good to know. I didn't know that. But if you get a scholarship based on the PSAT, isn't it still contingent on another score on the actual test?
No. It's a whole program that's just related to the PSAT.
So do you even have to take it at that point?
The SAT?
Correct.
Yeah, because the schools are not going to just accept the PSAT. You need to take the real SAT. Yeah, that's why I was telling you that I'm already going to start teaching my kid SAT words. Because really not that far from her taking the PSAT at least.
Yeah, good information. I didn't know that. So if you're listening, PSAT, get them ready.
So people even take courses for the PSAT. Like, we don't know about those things. And it also looks really good on your application if you're National Merit Commended or National Merit Semifinalist or National Merit Finalist, even if you didn't get all the way through to get a scholarship.
Okay, so I mean, that's a few years away for your daughter.
Yeah.
Well, same for mine, but got to get them ready.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's things like that like people don't know. Like, I was even talking to someone about the fact that nowadays a lot of schools, a lot of top schools are free depending on the parents' income level, and they didn't know that either.
Yeah, I heard you talking about that the other day.
So more recently, now Harvard has made it to where anyone whose family makes under $200,000, it's completely free. That's a pretty high level of income to be able to go to Harvard without tuition.
I feel like that's somehow going to come into DEI though. They'll make them scrap that somehow.
I think that would be hard. If your kid gets a 1600 on the SAT, doesn't matter if they're minority, women, whatever. There's no way you can say that was DEI. And that's why, like, my goal is, like, literally for my daughter to get a 1600 on the SAT.
I mean, yes, they could. All of a sudden, diversity includes poor.
Do you think it would get to that point? Because also, how would they, like, that's the thing about getting the scores and, like, prepping. How do you have an argument? How do you have an argument my kid gets a 1600 on the SAT? Like, you have no argument. Like, they were poor and they got a 1600? Like, they're a freaking genius, maybe.
Yeah, the argument is you can't afford it, so you shouldn't be able to go here.
I feel like that would be a very weak argument. I don't think anyone on the Supreme Court even would go for it. But yeah, there's a lot of schools. Like, Justin and Jared went to Stanford for free. And that was how many years ago? Like, over 10 years ago. But you still have those programs with the top schools where they're making it at least tuition free. And in some instances, everything free, like room and board, food. Like, Justin and Jared didn't have anything they had to pay for, I don't think, because of the parents' income level. Like, the dorm was covered, the food, like the meal plan, tuition. Like, so that's, to me, like a big incentive to get your kids into these schools.
Oh. So can we move on to basketball at this point?
Yeah, tell me about the Clips, because I haven't been paying attention. I feel like they're, in general, under the radar.
Well, first you should know that the Lakers, after celebrating their win over the Pacers last night on a tip-in by LeBron, had the game in hand tonight, but lost to the Bulls on a half-court buzzer beater by Josh Giddey.
Wait, did you see that before the pod, or you're watching right now? Because when I was watching, I thought the Bulls were down by like at least 10 points.
I went to YouTube TV and I saw that they had got within 1, and then Reeves put them up 3, and then they missed again, so they went down 5, and I turned it off, and then I just looked at my phone, and it was like Bulls win on half court shot.
That's crazy.
So the Bulls are playing really well. That's interesting to see. They're really young. But getting back to the Clippers, they're finally healthy. As far as Kawhi looking like himself, usually when he comes back from these injuries, he starts off really slow. There's a minute restriction. He'll average about 14 points a game. I've noticed he's back to averaging over 25 a game for the last 10. And the reason they were able to stay afloat at the start of the season was that Norman Powell was playing at an all-star level. But then he went out with a hamstring injury, and he's back. So now they're fully loaded. Ben Simmons actually looks really engaged with the Clippers.
Ben Simmons is there? I didn't even know where he was.
Well, he's really engaged on defense. They've been a good defensive team all year due to getting Jeff Van Gundy on the staff. So he's actually had some highlights, and people are like, really? Like, he's actually driving in, taking shots, being a good distributor, playing really good defense. And I think they're rounding into form right at the right time.
I'm looking at the standings, and they've actually gotten ahead of Golden State.
Yes, I mean, and everybody was like, well, they're hitting a really rough patch, and they're actually winning most of these games. I was watching them play OKC the other night. OKC didn't have 2 of their players, but they had it. They just couldn't make that last shot. But, I mean, OKC's they've been able to win with Holmgren, without him. I mean, that team's just, I mean, at this point, the only way they're going to lose is, I think, if maybe Shea would have to go down. Mm-hmm. I think even without Holmgren, they could probably still win the title. As long as I think Jalen Williams was still playing.
The problem with the Clippers sometimes, though, is that they'll look really good and then Kawhi gets injured.
Yeah, that's the only question every year.
Yeah.
Can he survive the playoffs? And like the unfortunate thing is they always end up in this situation at the end because he's been hurt where they have to try really hard. And some of the times, like I think last year, that's when he got hurt. And they kept him out, I think, the rest of the regular season. Came back in the playoffs. He looked halfway decent to me, but it wasn't enough. And then he ended up sitting out multiple playoff games against Dallas anyway.
Yeah. Well, it looks like right now the Clippers would be playing Denver if the season ended today. Do you think that they could beat Denver in a 7-game series?
They've actually been able to compete with Denver now.
Okay.
I mean, I remember when they lost in the bubble after that, they couldn't beat Denver to save their lives. Like they would lose every single time. But their team can beat Denver now. As I said, it's just going to be a matter. It's just Kawhi. Like Harden's nice to have, but I don't know how big he was an all-star this year when he's still shooting under 40% from the field this entire season. But they don't really need him to be an efficient scorer. The reason why he works there is because he's able to distribute the ball, which is what they never had when they had Paul George and Kawhi. He's a real point guard. So that's what helps them.
Yeah.
They could beat Denver. They're just going to have to play the way they've been playing on defense, and of course Kawhi needs to be Kawhi, which is right now.
Yeah.
Let me see what his stats are. I think over his last 10 is what I was looking. I was like, okay, finally there it is. He's finally back to an elite player.
Oh, they're
So like now he's up to his stats. Like that's how slow of a start he had. He's barely his stats for the season are close to 6 rebounds, 3 assists, almost 50% shooting.
and they're 8-2 over the last 10.
Yeah, and the one game they lost was to OKC, and they could have been 9-1 in this last 10.
Interesting. I think Golden
And even
State's done.
You think Golden State's done?
Yeah. I mean, they didn't look good versus Denver, and I felt like that was meaningful. And then really, how can they beat some of these teams? Like, if they continue to drop. I mean, they're the 7 seed now, Golden State.
Well, I think a lot of these positions are still going to flip. I mean, obviously for me, I hope the Clippers are able to get into like 5 or something. That way they don't have to worry about the play-in whatsoever.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the Warriors, I don't know. I haven't watched them. I was watching them for a little bit when they first got Butler, so I haven't really seen what they've been doing.
I think the size is probably the issue with Golden State. And that was particularly obvious versus Denver.
Yeah,
Well, if the Clippers
so,
move up to 5 and Lakers stay at 4, then they'd play each other.
Yeah, I think I was talking about this the other day at work. I mean, there's a chance that we'll finally see the Battle of LA here. Maybe in the first round, too.
That'd be interesting.
If Kawhi's playing the way he's playing, they can beat anybody. But that's always been the issue. I really felt that they probably would have won the title the year that the Bucks won it. They were playing really well. They still were able to take 2 games from the Suns.
Yeah.
I mean, Kawhi was out in the Utah series, which was the Western Conference semis. So they didn't even have him at all for the Western Conference finals. I mean, I feel like that would have been the year. I don't know what happened in the bubble because that year, too, they were really good. And they blew that 3-1 lead to the Nuggets. But, I mean, like I said, if Kawhi can somehow stay healthy, they'll have a chance against anybody.
I feel like I haven't watched them play at all this year. So I need to start paying attention to some Clippers games to see what's going on there.
Yeah, and the thing that's really changed for them is the defense. And that's what's really kept them from not falling too far this whole year. Because, like, I mean, even if they didn't have Kawhi, even if they didn't have Powell, like, the defense was good enough where they could still win some games. But I have zero confidence that even tomorrow or next week, they're going to be like, oh, we got to hold him out because his knee's swollen again or something.
What is the knee issue with him that it continues to happen?
He had that partial tear of the ACL, and then ever since then, he's just had like that swelling that somehow just gets out of control sometimes.
They barely lost to OKC by 2 points on March 23rd, the Clippers.
Yeah, like they were up late in that game. They just weren't able to hold on. Little mistakes here and there, but I mean, they almost had that game too. I mean, it's definitely a winnable game.
So it looks like the games to watch for at the end for them is they're going to be at Cleveland on the 30th. They're versus Houston on April 9th. They're at Golden State for the last game of the regular season. Those are probably their hard games, I guess.
And that's because they've already gone through a lot of hard games. They beat Cleveland already in this stretch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, now they can't let up.
Well, the regular season ends for them on April 13th. Like, we're almost at the playoffs.
Yeah.
Very close.
I only have one ticket left for the Vipers, which is this Saturday. So, yeah, season's coming to a close. Speaking
of G League, did you see that Bronny scored like 37 points in the G League?
39.
Oh, 39.
He was very upset that he missed, I think, a technical free throw because he would have had a 40.
I thought it was funny that I saw like a headline from someone. I don't know if it was Nick Wright or who it was. Like, oh, we were wrong about Bronny, and something about 39 points. And then I was like, it's in the G League. Like, get back to me when that's in the NBA.
Well, they got really excited because he had a lot of minutes in a game against Milwaukee because they had a lot of injuries and he scored 17 points. Yeah. But to me, like I said, he's going to have to show it to us on a regular basis in the NBA. There's been plenty of guys that have put up big numbers in the G League and ultimately either don't get a lot of run or just become like semi-decent role players. So, I mean, he's still got a ways to go, but he's definitely improved. I'll give him that. He really couldn't find his shot for the start of the season. And I find it funny how they ignore the initial stats. So, like, when the season started for the G League, it's actually like a preseason tournament. So, of course, when they talk about his stats, they never include those. They only include the stats after the fact when he started playing better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, he's going to have the best chance to do whatever the best he can be is because of the fact that he grew up with LeBron. LeBron's helping him in terms of like teaching him how to train, what he needs to do. And then LeBron's going to make sure, as long as he can, that he stays on an NBA team in some way. So if he's going to do something, he's going to get that opportunity because of the fact that he has all these advantages.
Yeah, I'm still interested to see if he's going to be on the playoff roster because he was on the bench tonight again, and they had been really taking him on the road trips, and then they send him back down for I think the last 2 home games. Well, I'm lying. I don't even know if they're actually home games, but they sent him down for 2 games. I don't know if he goes back at all at this point, or if they're just going to keep him on the roster, and if they are going to keep him on the playoff roster, I don't know.
Well, I feel like with the LeBron we know, he's going to be on the roster.
You think he'll be on the playoff roster?
I think he would be because he has basically pulled a lot of strings to make sure that his son is with him and gets the best opportunity.
I feel like for the playoffs, if they do that, I mean, I don't think they're that serious about winning because in the playoffs, like if injuries happen, you need to have a player that can 100% contribute, which in the playoffs, I don't think he will. I mean, like I said, he's getting better. I'll give him that. But I don't think he's ready to give playoff minutes.
Well, LeBron probably wants him with them in the playoffs. So I feel like that's going to be a factor. We'll see how powerful LeBron is because I think that he has done a lot of things to make sure Bronny's with him. And if he cared about winning, they would have drafted someone else, right?
This draft was really weak.
Okay.
So you kind of haven't really had anybody stand out. That was a low pick. So they kind of were able to get away with that. Like not even the top picks have been very good this year.
Okay, well, let's see what happens. So I got to tune in to some Clippers games. We got to see what happens with Bronny James as we go into the playoffs. But it's already about to be that time where we get to watch the playoffs and see what happens.
Yep. Well, at least baseball's back as well.
I don't follow baseball that much. Like, I'm very much a playoff MLB person. But yeah, I got some notifications that the Dodgers played pretty well.
Yeah, they can still go 162-0.
I feel like this is impossible. Just too hard.
Yeah, but of course, they're so stacked that people are talking about it. But they barely won today, 5-4.
It's just, baseball's tough. Like, you got to have the right pitching. Like, even the greatest pitchers have off days. The batters have off days. Then there's injuries. So.
Well, just the Dodgers last year winning the World Series was like the craziest thing because all the pitchers were hurt, and that's the year they won.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. Also, what was crazy is that you thought they were done in like game 5. I'm like, what? They're up in the series.
Yeah, but we had no pitching, but somehow, I don't know how they pulled it off. That was, after that, I mean, we've always talked so much shit about Dave Roberts, but obviously he's a really good manager.
Is he? Or like, they just have a lot of money to sign stars. Like, they have Ohtani, they have Betts.
Yeah, but the pitching staff was insane. Like, they did really well in the playoffs. Like, was it the year before this when they lost? Man, they just got clobbered. I was like, there's no way. Like, we're going to score 10 runs a game. And then last year we got into the playoffs. We were even worse. Like, our pitching staff was so depleted. I was like, yeah, we're going to have to score 10 runs a game. But it turned out we didn't because, like, every pitcher that got put in literally was on their game every single game. I think besides the first round where we had like 2 bad games, like every other game, the pitchers were pretty spot on. The worst that we had was like 1 bad inning, and that's it. And sometimes we were able to come back because it was only that 1 inning.
Yeah.
It wasn't multiple bad innings. It wasn't like, oh, well, this guy, if we pitch him again, we're going to lose. No, that same guy could come back another game and he would shut out the other team.
Yeah. Well, probably you get things from Dave Roberts and he also takes away things. I feel like he's definitely lost at least 1 World Series championship.
The Astros won because they were cheating.
I don't know. Maybe. But he definitely hasn't been perfect about his decision making. I mean, I think it's hard in any sport or really in any part of life to always be perfect in your decision making. But it also helps, like I said, to have Mookie Betts, Ohtani, Freddie Freeman. That really helps in terms of canceling out some of your mistakes.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I think it's a good time to end the chat and the pod.
The pod, bro.
So continue to promote us to your friends. We're on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Some of our episodes are on YouTube. If you have any questions, email us at casadecabasuspod@gmail.com. And hopefully next time Justin will be around, but he's a busy man.
And we'll finally take that mailbag question.
All right, until next time.
Out.